The idea of the Crystal Cathedral going bankrupt was so unbelievably mind-blowing. Like, that was a huge lesson for me.
Yeah.
That, like, there is literally nothing, including a country. Like, the way we feel about America, like, imagine somebody said America is going to fall in 2 years.
Yeah.
That's how it felt at the Crystal Cathedral.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are talking about how to find God's calling in your life. Bobby, how are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. So this topic interests me a lot, especially as of lately. Do you feel like God has a calling for every Christian?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No doubt.
And then are there any like verses that instantly come to mind when you think about that kind of like...
Yeah, if you're saved, you're called.
That's a Bible verse?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. The first one that comes to mind for me is Jeremiah 29:11, which is for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. It's a little different, but similar.
Yeah.
So what about for you? Like when, do you remember the first time you felt called, like the Lord was calling you to something?
Yeah, I think first when we talk about calling, very, very often people make it like, what's my calling? Like this, what's my big hero story?
Mm-hmm.
And my experience is that God doesn't call us to one thing, he calls us to multiple callings. Very often we miss the calling that he's called us to because of our carnality or our laziness or our fear or whatever. There's something that gets in there, or sin sometimes. In fact, I actually think that God's going to be raising up more female leaders because of like the overuse of, like, not overuse, but the ubiquity of pornography. I think that there's a lot of pastors and leaders who are called, but they're just not able to give up pornography. As a pastor, I'm just seeing it so like common, and the younger the leader is, the more that is, and anybody who's yielding to that, is not going to be able to function in a calling, I don't think. And so they're choosing sin, and there's lots of sins too that everybody can yield to, where it's like, I feel called, but I'm yielding to this other thing more.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing we have to understand is that the first calling is to a holy calling. So before you're called to like change the world, you're called to be a holy person.
Yeah.
And that doesn't come through trying harder or being legalistic or religious. It comes by being in the Lord's presence. So the more we're in God's presence and the more we, walk in that power, then the more power we have over Satan. I think there's also a discipline thing too, of just like disciplining your mind. So we're called to a holy calling. And so before we save the world, we got to be holy.
Yeah.
So then the second piece is like, again, just realizing that everybody's called to multiple callings, and usually it's small callings before the big one. So a great example of that is the life of King David. David did the little things first before he did the big things. They talk about the lion and the bear, but I even like to think about him like killing foxes and whatever, little bobcats and things before he killed the lion and the bear.
Yeah, even just sheep that are wandering off.
And just going after the sheep. Yeah, he had to do the grunt work as a kid to develop for God. But that was a calling too. Like killing the lion and the bear was also God's calling for him.
Yeah.
And I feel like if I killed a lion, I'd be like, I did it. I did God's calling in my life. But no, there's still like a Goliath.
Yeah.
And so then the Goliath reveals the David. Yeah. But you can't just go from zero to Goliath. I mean, you can. God can do that, but it typically doesn't. It's typically a process.
Seems like, the growing process is definitely something the Lord uses. I also feel like, to your point, maybe when like the clickbait version, as people want to know, like, how do I get my big calling? Mm-hmm. But I do think, to your point, it's like, well, there's actually plenty of calling in the Bible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's all like prerequisites in some ways,
Yeah. I would, if I were to title this podcast, I'd probably call it God Wants You to Get Your Reps In.
Yeah.
Something like that. I think people disregard that part of our holy calling is getting those little reps in. From the holy life, that means reading your Bible and praying and sharing your faith and being outspoken about your faith and praying for others. From the calling standpoint, like being willing to do the little things that God is calling you to do.
Yeah.
So that we need to get our reps in. We need to do the little things first, and we need to do it consistently to get the big things. And that's just a good principle in life.
Yeah.
So like when you feel like God's calling us, like pick up that little piece of trash. Like, I'm not gonna do that. You know,
Yeah.
well, God called you to do that.
Yeah.
And you may not understand how that's important to the changing of your character. I'm not saying God's telling us to pick up every little piece of trash, but
Yeah.
if we're led by the Holy Spirit, God's going to tell us to do little things like that.
Yeah.
You know, so
I felt like this is something I like feel deeply. And when I look back on my life, and not that I'm like have some like mountaintop situation right now, but I do feel like I've seen the Lord show up in a lot of ways. And I feel like, man, the path to like God's calling is found in like the micro daily obedience. Just like the minute by minute. It's like, it's easy to fear, oh, I'm getting distracted by all this low level stuff. I need to be aiming for my big goal. But I feel like you can almost like let go of that.
totally.
And just be like, what is faithfulness in the next 5 minutes, you know?
I do think there are moments where we need a lot of faith and we just take a huge leap. So I think tipping point really notices something that happens in everybody's life by Malcolm Gladwell, that book Tipping Point. But it basically says that there's like a build up and then it tips. Yeah. But I think the flip side of that is a lot of Christians don't take the leap. You know, they get the reps in, and then there's like this moment where they could just have like this huge thing, and we also don't want to miss out on those either.
Yeah, that's great.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example.
I think that's maybe one of the more vital points for people who have been a believer for a while.
So it's almost like there's two types of people, where there's people that are just waiting for that leap, and the leap opportunity never comes because they never got their reps in.
Yeah.
But then there's also people who get their reps in, and then the leap comes, and they're like, "No, I'm just gonna keep doing my little reps." And it's like, "No, you've done it. Now jump, go."
Yeah.
You know,
someone training for a race, but they're not racing.
Yeah.
And there's someone who's waiting to race, and they're never training.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we want both. Yeah. So again, using David as a frame. You know, every day, faithfully caring for the sheep. A lot of those days are boring.
Yeah.
A lot of times there's no, like the lion and bear thing probably happened once or twice.
Yeah.
The rest of the days, he's sitting out there in the sun. He's kind of thirsty. He's bored. He wants to go do something fun. He's not. His dad told him watch the sheep, so he's watching the sheep. But then when the moment comes that he's getting his reps in and he's doing this stuff and he's building this thing, then when Goliath comes, you know, that's the leap. That's the big moment. But he had to have the reps to be able to kill Goliath, but he also had to have the faith to go killing this guy, you know?
Yeah.
So
that's good. It's good.
Yeah.
So then for calling wise for me, I feel like you were touching on, there's like a basic level of calling for all believers. But for you, do you feel like there was a moment that comes to mind when you're like, oh, I think I'm actually called to like one of my callings is to this?
Yeah. I think our calling here was, I already mentioned this on a podcast a few episodes ago, but that the calling was actually for me and Hannah. So I think that was one of our big callings, like the calling to Hour of Power, Shepherd's Grove, was something that the Lord put on Hannah and me at the same time on our wedding day. Like when we got into the limo to go to the hotel, we were both like, are you feeling from the Lord?
Yeah.
And
cool.
And I thought that
so just to clarify, you guys got in the limo on your wedding day. You got married at the Crystal Cathedral.
Yep.
And when you got in, there was something that you both maybe recognized in your spirit that was like,
yep.
Oh, the Lord is drawing us to something.
That's
here.
right. And what's even weirder is we weren't super spirit led back then. We were, but for both of us to get this like ping from God at the same time, like talking in the limo on the way to the hotel.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but most husbands who are virgins, me, they're not thinking about their calling on the way to the hotel room. I was. I mean, we were like talking about, you know, like, is this what God's doing? Are we supposed to, you know, be a part of this church? And it just seemed very clear that pinged us there, and then it just didn't leave. Because we went back to Oklahoma, but for 6 months we were weighing that, and we took a time to go down to Dallas to actually pray about that. And then when we tried to come out to help my dad, everybody was like, you don't need to come out here. It's fine. We're like, well, we feel called to come out, you know. So.
And what was that? Was that when you guys were eventually, so
we were newlyweds. We were 21.
Yeah. So what happened next, I guess I'm saying? Like,
well, originally I had a pretty good job. I was working at a real estate investment trust, and I was hoping to go into the world of finance. I think I was excelling in the business stuff. I was also considering working with your dad.
Yeah.
So I was playing with that idea.
Yeah.
And there was a lot, but the frame I had was, building some kind of an empire, some financial empire. Yeah. And then like kind of doing what your dad does actually, which is like my main thing is business, but I use business as a way to do ministry. So I was a super committed believer. I was volunteering in ministry. I was a worship leader as a volunteer and some other things. But But my frame was business, and then God was like, nope, we want you to go right into this. So So the main thing we did is we wanted to come and help my dad, do ministry.
Yeah, that's good.
But again, I shared that whole story about 3 episodes back. I think.
Gotcha.
Well, Malden. So you might not have seen it. I think it was Malden.
I don't think I've seen it yet.
That's why you're like, oh, I don't know the story. See?
So with that though, okay, so that's a time you felt like the Lord called you to something. Mm-hmm. Is there more, or do you feel like that's sort of like in some ways, or like that's like the main one that has sort of like that they all kind of bracket under?
Well, no, I think there's been other little things too, because I think that was a big overarching call, but the story didn't go the way I thought it would, because my dad was the main reason I came to the cathedral. I wasn't thinking about myself. I thought we were called to bring young people in and then go do something else. And then my dad and grandpa kind of had a falling out. A lot of that was family tensions that I didn't really have anything to do with. Thank goodness I didn't get involved in it. But, my dad left, and then we had this young adult church basically that we planted. But I thought then the cathedral was over, because we just, it just kind of moved on. And then there's this bankruptcy, and we're watching it from afar. We're not really involved, and then we come back. So that story, the way it happened, the idea of the Crystal Cathedral going bankrupt was so unbelievably mind-blowing. Like that was a huge lesson for me.
Yeah.
That there is literally nothing, including a country, like the way we feel about America. Like imagine somebody said America is going to fall in 2 years.
Yeah.
That's how it felt at the Crystal Cathedral. The donations coming in were like $70 million a year. Wow. And then it just nosedived because of all of this turmoil, and there was all this debt. And now that might sound like, oh my gosh, these ministries make too much money, but keep in mind that money was fueling almost all that money was going to airtime and payroll. So it was going out
to get the message out.
Yeah, it wasn't like my grandpa wasn't rich. In fact, my grandpa kind of died impoverished and was never. He had a comfortable life, but you would never say he was like a multi-millionaire.
Yeah,
And so he just did well, but that's because he was constantly raising millions of dollars to pay for all this airtime, just not only here but all over the world.
Yeah.
And so that machine worked until my grandpa, because of health reasons, really couldn't do that anymore. And then the response by the next level of leadership was too slow to adapt to the collapsing amount of revenue.
Yeah.
So what was crazy is to watch something I thought would be there forever.
Yeah. Get
sold, and it was like, wow, unless the Lord builds a house, we labor in vain. I mean, it's just like,
anyway.
It's
maybe an important part of, like, as you're called to something, to also see, you get a front row seat, to seeing unless the Lord builds it.
Yeah, and I think a good heart check for anybody, whether you're in business or ministry, is, could I stick a knife in this Isaac?
Yeah.
Like if the Lord said walk away or shut it down.
Yeah.
Could I do that?
Yeah.
In other words, do I own it or does God own it?
Totally.
And I think that is, as a ministry scales or as a business scales, and you call yourself a committed disciple of the Lord Jesus Christ, you need to ask that question, because that's how the enemy creeps in and takes away all the power. The enemy allows you to succeed in your own strength at some point. Meanwhile, the presence of the Lord has already left. The favor of the Lord has left, and the enemy is not attacking you because he wants you to think you're doing in your own success, and it just knocks over that Jenga tower, which is all you were building.
And that's a great point on the list of, I think, of things. A part of calling is like, a guaranteed part of calling is to take up your cross.
100%.
And to follow him. And that is, and if it's not for him, to be able to lay your life down, essentially. Is a part
what
of
if your calling is to be a martyr? Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
It's really true. I mean, what if your calling, I mean, and the irony is trusting that the best life I can live is the one that's under God's mantle and calling.
Yeah.
But I'm just learning more and more the power of God's presence and submitting to the Lord,
I want to know, so I think for most people, they'd be like, well, clearly Bobby has been called to preach and teach, amongst other things, and to lead. Do you feel like there was a time that felt like a clear calling in that, where it was like the Lord kind of communicated that? Or do you think it was more just like the circumstances the Lord brought communicated that?
To preach and teach?
Yeah.
I didn't start in ministry as a preacher. I started as a worship leader. So it is a good question. I think when the first phase at the cathedral as a young guy, I think I very quickly realized a gift, partly because of Hannah, that I had a great way of communicating. Because I would have conversations like this before I started preaching.
Yeah.
Typically with other young men.
Yeah.
Who were lost or seeking, and I just feel like the Lord gave me an ability to answer those questions almost in a divine way, and I think that kind of developed into a teaching gift.
Yeah.
But even when I started teaching, I was not a good teacher, because I still remember when I got up in our first gathering, when it was like a youth thing of like 20 people, and half the people in the room are my friends and family. So it's like
hardest crowd.
Well, for me, I'm like, there's no reason I should be nervous. I think it was about 6 months to a year where I purposefully planned that everything would be out of order. Like my Bible would be over there, and the stool would be here, and the pulpit would be over there. So I would have something to do for the first like 30 seconds just to get my heart rate to drop.
Wow.
Because it'd be like,
yeah.
And it's like, nobody cares. It's not taped. It's like, everybody knows it's a new thing. And it'd be like, because the first time I'd be like, and again, it goes back to reps. Like, there was clearly some talent and some calling there, but that's not enough. You have to do the hard work of writing and planning and speaking. And I think it's true for for you for film. I'm sure it's also the same, something similar.
Yeah. No, there's one thing you said I think is super valuable, which you're like, when you're having those conversations, you're like, oh, there seems to be maybe like a supernatural, maybe grace on those conversations. Like, oh, that kind of worked out. I feel like maybe the Lord was in that.
Yeah.
I feel like that's one thing I'm seeing as well. A lot of us may be inclined to be like, Lord, tell me my calling. But I would say, I feel like in the past like 6 months, what I've seen and what I'm experiencing is I feel like the Lord is like, the calling's already been there. The calling's already been there, whether or not you know it consciously or not. And as I felt like and I've been doing film stuff, and I felt like the Lord, I had this prayer time with the Lord where I was like, okay, what would I do for the Lord if there was no fear? And if I knew his grace would be on it, that he would, and then I made a list of things, and I felt like instantly was like, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do that.
Yeah.
So I started doing that. And what I come to find is like, this was like a few months ago, I was laying in bed, and I was like, oh, I'm realizing like specifically the Lord has called me to be an artist of faith and create stuff, but also to disciple artists of faith. And this isn't new, actually. If I look back to when I was 16 years old, I've been like meeting up with other artists of faith, and I've been talking about this thing, and there's been this supernatural grace. It's not like it's life-changing, but it's like it comes naturally, and it seems like the Lord's grace is on it.
Totally.
And I never planned to do this. It just kind of happened, and I think there's something to, like, I've heard this, the analogy of like a duck in water looks super peaceful and smooth, and a duck out of water is like awkward and waddling. And it's almost like there's just these certain things in life, I feel like, that are like a duck in water that come naturally to us.
I think I've told you this before, but I look at life, it's a weird analogy, and I heard it from somewhere, but life is like free lottery tickets. Your odds of winning a lottery is like 1 in 100 million, astronomical. But imagine they were free. Like you go out the door and you're just constantly getting free lottery tickets constantly.
Yeah.
Then there'd be zero risk and some huge upside with very little downside. And then once one of those wins, you're like, yes.
Yeah.
And I just can't reiterate enough the importance spiritually of like not laying around and not being lazy. I'm utterly convinced God doesn't call lazy people.
Yeah.
Like even in your story, the calling was aligned with something you were doing that was fun, that you enjoyed, but like, oh, you had actually gotten the reps in of meeting with multiple people.
Hundreds over
Hundreds,
the years.
right.
Yeah.
So if you look in the Bible, I might be wrong, but I don't think there's ever someone who's called by God who's not currently working on something. So like Moses was tending to his sheep, Elisha was out in the field plowing with the ox, all the disciples like Matthew was collecting taxes, Peter, James, John, I think were fishing when he came up, or mending their nets. Like you never see somebody maybe there's an example, but I can't think of anybody who's just kind of like laying under a tree and thinking, and then God's like, here's the thing. I think God will do that, but you never see God. Like, I feel like God can work with our sin. He can even work with demonic oppression. He can work with all this stuff. He just can't work with laziness. Like somebody who's like, I'm only around until God calls me. And I think it's becoming because of phones and video games and porn and bad eating and all this stuff, I think is very, very hard for a lot of the people listening to us today to ever receive any kind of important calling from the Lord, because they've already chosen a different path of just sloth and lying around. In your imagination, your dream is to just not work and not doing anything. You're just never going to receive a call from God. And I think the opposite side, the hopeful side of that is like, well, if that bothers you, then get out. Just like get dressed, take a shower, and just get out of the house.
Yeah. Go
to a cafe, go on a walk. Like, even if you're not working, like, stop just sitting around, get out and do something.
I've heard this, I'm stealing this from Harry Yoon. He's a really talented film editor, but he's a strong believer as well. And he was saying the analogy of a dancer. If the Lord is leading, when you're dancing, you need to be moving. So even the slightest little touch of the hand can turn the direction and cause something to happen. But if they're not moving, none of those signals work.
That's right. Yeah, it's hard to steer a car that's in park.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's good. Awesome. If you guys have any examples maybe in the Bible, what we're talking about, where like God calls people who aren't doing stuff or anything, any questions on this, just put them in the comments, and we always love to go through them. But Bobby, thank you, and we'll catch you next week.
All right.
See you guys.
Thanks for watching the podcast. We really appreciate it. Hey, don't forget to comment below, and we really want to engage with you. We're going to read those comments. We're going to reply to some of them if they're really good. And thank you always for watching. We're out every Thursday.